We've got breaking news out of college football where Florida has fired head coach Billy Napier in the midst of his fourth season in Gainesville. That's the very latest from our own Matt Zenitz and Richard Johnson. The Gators are 3-4 on the season following Saturday's homecoming win against Mississippi State. In his 4 years with the Gators, Napier tallied a 22-23 record, which included just one winning season in 2024. That's the fourth worst winning percentage in Florida football history among coaches who have overseen at least 20 games, and the worst since the 1940s. Wide receivers coach Billy Gonzalez will take over as interim head coach for the Gators. Florida is on a bye this week before returning next week for its annual rivalry game with Georgia in Jacksonville. For much more on this, let's go ahead and welcome in our own Ran Carthon, who sits beside me here in studio. Richard Johnson joins us from afar. Richard, I'll start with you. It was only a matter of when, not if. Your reaction to this news?
Yeah, this was basically a week-to-week basis, particularly after Florida lost their USF game earlier in the season in Gainesville. It just seemed like every week it was just a matter of when and not if. Florida is in their second bye week this upcoming week before that Georgia game. So there is sort of a natural time to do it and install an interim head coach, get a game plan, and get all the systems going on the back end to do it within the next 2 weeks. But at the end of the day, Billy Napier has pretty much been on the hot seat perpetually for the last season and a half, besides a short win streak at the end of last season when DJ Lagway was pressed into duty because of a season-ending injury to quarterback Graham Mertz. But specifically, as far as this year goes, Florida had some pretty high expectations coming into this season to potentially be a dark horse college football playoff team. Maybe they could do something similar to what South Carolina did last year, which was be on the fringe of the debate as maybe a 3-loss team. But at the end of the day, it was really the lack of development of quarterback DJ Lagway. It stunted growth from him after an injury-plagued offseason, and some of the similar things that have plagued Florida's tenure under Napier, a stagnant offense. Napier is the offensive coordinator and play caller. And again, Lagway's lack of development, part of that was due to, again, Lagway's injury, but also a wide receiver room that was also banged up throughout fall camp as well. Florida was also still penalized, and the penalties were very costly. For instance, a penalty for a player spitting in the face of an opponent against USF, which helped the Bulls go on a drive to win that game at the end a few weeks ago. So it's a situation where, in many ways, Florida couldn't get out of its own way on the field, despite the talent that they had, and a win over Mississippi State that was itself a mistake-fueled afternoon in Gainesville was not enough to save Billy Napier's for the medium or long term.
And I'll just say this as a Florida alum and former player there, this is the time to get the hire right. Because ever since the Urban Meyer era, there has been a revolving door at the head coach position at the University of Florida. And right now, the University of Florida has to set a precedent in what they want their head coach to look like. No more chasing ghosts, no more going for the hotshot young up-and-comer. Let's, for once and for all, settle this and go make the home run hire and get this person no matter the cost, because this will now settle the program and not have us going through so many coaches since we've seen here since the 2011 season. So this is the time now, because you have so much time before the end of the season to vet and carefully vet the amount of talent that's out there for the head coaching position, and let's go hire that top guy at the University of Florida.
Florida will owe Billy Napier a little over $21 million in his buyout, according to his contract. Richard, I want to come back to you on this. You know, year after year, Napier refused to hire an offensive play caller and give up play calling for this team himself. How much do you think that really contributed to his demise in Gainesville?
Yeah, I think some of that is within the eye of the beholder, right? Because if DJ Lagway has improvement as a passer, because Lagway is able to practice, change his throwing motion over the summer, and he is himself a better passer, I think the offense ends up looking okay. That's not to say that it's Lagway's fault or all Napier's fault. It is to say that when you've got a team, everybody is at fault. Again, Billy Napier is the head coach, so he's the one who's held most accountable, obviously. But at the end of the day, there were a lot of reasons why Florida's offense never really got in gear under Napier as its chief play caller.
Yeah, and I'll say this. As the head coach at the University of Florida and for most high-level SEC programs, there is a lot on your plate. And so that's where it comes in, filling out a full staff that you can trust, that you can put these things on, the play calling duties. So that will allow you to become more of a head coach and oversee the entire operation. You can't put everything on your plate. If you go back to, because Coach Spurrier, who I played under, he called the plays, but he had that strong defensive coordinator on the other side where he knew he didn't have to touch, and then he oversaw the whole program. Same thing with Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer came into it as a hotshot guy that can call the offense, but even throughout his tenure, he gave away play calling duty, and you saw those coaches become eventual head coaches. So when you're coming into a job like this, you have to be able to delegate and allow your assistants to become assistants and allow them to grow and develop, and then that will give you a more full picture of what's going on in your program.
A lot on your plate, but when you're getting paid the big bucks, right, you got to chalk up some W's here and there, that's for sure. I want to play off one point that you mentioned. You brought up Spurrier, of course. It seems like hire after hire after hire in Gainesville. All they want to do is get back to what they had under Spurrier, of course, right? But can a new coach get Florida back in the mix to be a true contender? What are your thoughts?
Yes, because Richard talked about it. He talked about the amount of talent that they've been able to bring in. It's just it's been a developmental part of the game, and the game has changed so much that these young men need development. And so you were talking about the Spurrier thing, and I think and when I mentioned earlier the ghost, that's the ghost we've been chasing, the ghost of Steve Spurrier, because not only was he potentially one of the greatest players to come through the program, but he's been the greatest coach to come through the program. But here is where I'd like to see the university go and hire a leader and a developer of men. And not the hotshot OC or DC or whomever. Let's go get someone that can stand in front of not only the fan base, the media, but that locker room and galvanize everyone and be able to develop all these young men that we're bringing in the program.
Before I get you to respond to that, Richard, it's just interesting just hearing you say all of these things that you want. It does sound like a guy, James Franklin, checks all those boxes. I don't know. Maybe not, Richard.
I think James Franklin's going to be a call that a lot of ADs are going to make this college football coaching cycle. Obviously, he said yesterday on College Game that he is open for business. He also has that duty to mitigate clause in his contract, so contractually, he better be open for business. I think that Florida's problems, to be honest with you, mostly showed up on Saturday. I think Billy Napier did a lot to modernize Florida as far as the back-of-house systems and the roster overall. They've got good young players at a lot of different levels. Jaden Ball's a tremendous young running back. Dallas Wilson is a freak show at wide receiver. I think they're really good on both lines of scrimmage right now. You saw Mekhi Burrow yesterday had the interception to end the game as a defensive lineman against Mississippi State. They got Cormani McClain out of the transfer portal from Colorado, something of a reclamation project, put some weight on him, and he's looking like a great young player in the defensive secondary. It's not a lack of talent on this Florida team. There were a lot of things developmentally, I think, from Sunday to Friday, so to speak, that Florida was actually doing pretty well. But when you got to Saturday, the results were just never there.
You know, you feel for all these kids that are in Gainesville right now. Rand, just in your opinion, do you see Florida's key offensive players? You got quarterback, of course, DJ Lagway, receivers, Dallas Wilson, Rennell Brown, their running back, Jaden Boss, sticking around for the next head coach?
That's the wait and see part. And that's where I say you got to be able to make this hire on the level of someone that these players will believe in and the guys that will want to stick around. You mentioned Rennell Brown, the third, VB3. He's a legacy. Right? His grandfather played there, his father played there, his uncle played there. And so you'd hate to lose a guy like that, because to me that will say a lot about where a young man whose legacy and all he's ever known is Gator football and where he sees the program. And you mentioned the Jaden Boss, the Dallas Wilson, all these young talented players to build around, and then DJ Lagway. Then on the defensive side of the ball, you have a ton of young talent that have come there because of Billy Napier. And so him and his staff have been able to get the young men there. Now let's see if this next head coach can keep the talent there and continue to build upon that.
Yeah, Rand, and obviously it's not just the new head coach, right? It's going to be if the new head coach is going to bring in a new front office staff or he's going to retain the current front office infrastructure that was instituted earlier this year with Nick Polk as the program's new general manager. We'll see what happens there. But now that's the task. The task is keeping and renegotiating with the players that are on this roster right now to see how many you can retain. Obviously, it's a pretty big question whether DJ Lagway will be on this team moving forward next year now that Billy Napier is out of the job. Lagway was a guy who I found very loyal to Billy Napier. We'll see what happens now that Napier's gone. Again, like we've been saying in the segment, there's a lot of talent on Florida's roster. The future of Florida's football program will depend on who and how many of that talent can be retained next year.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there as we have to hit a quick break. But there will be a lot more discussion when it comes to Florida's next head coach and what we just learned that Billy Napier out at the University of Florida. The guys will have much more on this on the College Football Insiders podcast. All you got to do is scan that QR code on your screen and watch and listen wherever you get your podcast.